You know, when Ali officially retired and when Larry Holmes was dominating the heavyweight division, people got sort of tired of the heavyweights from a super fight perspective. They had so many. But the lower weights were starting to rule the school, as we say, from about 1977 to about 1985. Now, the welterweights were loaded, the lightweights were loaded. And the junior welterweights were strong as well. You had Antonio Cervantes, Alexis Arguello, Duran, Benitez, Sugar Ray Leonard, all the myriad of welterweight and lightweight contenders. Esteban de Jesus was still around. And super fights were very common. But it was an unforeseen force, especially in the light welterweight division, that drew a heavy amount of attention, because anybody called a hawk is going to be somebody you have to pay attention to. Now today we're going to be talking about probably a top 30 fighter all time, Aaron Pryor. Now Aaron Pryor competed in the pro ranks from 1976 to 1990. He was a two-time light welterweight champion, having held the WBA title from 1980-83 and the IBF title from 1984 to 1985. Now, what was ironic here, IBF, the International Boxing Federation, did not exist until there was enough fighters like Pryor that was going to be recognized, and he put the belt on him, like you see in wrestling now, just given the belt. Aaron Pryor was so dominant in light welterweights, in 84 he said, "Here's the crown." Now, additionally, he held the Ring Magazine's prestigious Universal title from 80 to 83 and the Lineal title from 83 to 86. Now, in 82, the Boxing Writers Association of America named Pryor as their Fighter of the Year. He was inducted into the International Boxing Hall of Fame in 1996, and in 1999 was voted by the AP as the world's best light welterweight of the 20th century. In 2002, he's ranked as the 35th greatest boxer of the past 80 years by the Ring. Now, he had an amateur record that is so mind-boggling, even saying it might not be believed. He had a record of 204-16 as an amateur. He won the AAU Lightweight Championships in 73. In 75, Canadian Pryor again won the National AAU Lightweight Championship and a silver medal at the Pan American Games, losing the final to Canadian Chris Clark. Now, keep this in mind. Pryor had a big respect for Canadian fighters. He took down a lot of Canadian fighters in his career, which gave him almost like a secondary fan base, especially in Eastern Canada. We saw Pryor as somebody that was representing the world belt by also taking on our best Canadian fighters. Now, Pryor bet the future champion of all people, Thomas Hearns, in the lightweight finals of the 76 National Golden Gloves, but lost to Howard Davis Jr. at the 76 Olympic trials. Pryor was an alternate in the 76 Summer Olympics in Montreal, and as you know, the 5 gold medals from that great team. Obviously, Pryor would have won. See, at the Olympics, you're only allowed to send one representative. Now, again, 220 amateur fights, 204-16. Now, he turned pro on November 11th, Remembrance Day 76, with a second round knockout of Larry Smith, for which he made, of all things, $400. A few days later, Pryor signed a managerial contract with Buddy LaRosa, owner of LaRosa's Pizzeria. He was also trained by Raymond Cartier. Pryor fought 8 times in 77, winning all but two by knockout. The only 2 fighters who lasted the entire fight with Pryor that year were Jose Resto and Johnny Summerhays, each losing an 8-round unanimous decision. After the fight with Summerhays, who at the time was a top 20 British Commonwealth contender, Pryor won 26 fights in a row by knockout, and it was the longest knockout streaks in the history of boxing at that level. Now, in his last fight in 1979, he was pitted for the first time against a former or future world champion, where he faced former WBA light welterweight champion, the Peppermint Man, Alfonso Frazier of Panama. He knocked out Frazier in the 5th round, advancing his fight record to 20-18 knockouts. After defeating Frazier, Pryor entered the WBA rankings. Now, on August 2nd, 1980, he faced 2-time world champion Antonio Cervantes of Colombia for the WBA light welterweight title. He made for the fight $50,000. The fight took place in Pryor's hometown of Cincinnati, and it was nationally televised by the CBS network. Pryor was knocked down in round 1, but he rose and KO'd Cervantes in round 4 to become title holder. He eventually made his first title defense on November 22, 1980, knocking out Canadian champ Gaetan Hart in the 6th round, which he made $100,000 for the fight. Again, it was quite weird because he could take on any type of contender, but he had a fascination when taking on Canadian fighters because, again, there was a big draw, especially for the TV audience. Now, in December 1980, Pryor rejected an offer of $500,000 to fight Sugar Ray Leonard for the WBC welterweight championship because he wanted more money. When the WBC raised the offer to $750,000, he rejected that as well. Pryor then signed to fight WBC light welterweight champion Sal Mami in a unification bout for $1 million. The bout was tentatively scheduled for February 7, 1981. However, the fight fell apart when the corrupt promoter Harold Smith disappeared amid allegations that he was involved in a $21.3 million fraud against Wells Fargo. Smith, whose real name was Ross Fields, was later sentenced to 10 years in prison and was convicted of 29 counts of fraud and embezzlement. Pryor was then offered $750,000 to fight Duran in April 1981, but Pryor turned it down because his new attorney told him not to sign anything until he worked out a new contract with his manager La Rosa. By the time they worked out a new agreement, the chance to fight Duran was gone. Now, on June 27, 1981, Pryor knocked out Lennox Blackmore in the 2nd round. He then defended the title against undefeated Dujon Johnson on November 14, 1981. Johnson knocked Pryor down in round 1, but Pryor came back to stop Johnson in the 7th round. He then faced Miguel Montella and knocked him out the 12th round on March 21, 1982. His next title offense was against the undefeated Akio Kamada of Japan. The fight took place on Independence Day 1982, and once again Pryor was knocked down in the 1st round, but came down to score a 6th-round knockout. So, just to recap here, ladies and gentlemen, 5'6". That's why he was getting knocked down a lot. A lot of people said he was not ready for the taller fighters when he moved up a couple of pounds in weight, but he had tenacity like crazy. Now, when he eventually signed to face Sugar Ray Leonard for the undisputed welterweight title in the fall of '82 for $750,000, but before fighting Pryor, Leonard first had to defend his title against Roger Stafford in Buffalo in 1982. The Sunday before the bout, Pryor was driving to Buffalo from his Cincinnati home to taunt Leonard and hype their planned bout. He heard in the car radio the news that Leonard had suffered a detached retina in his left eye and the fight was off. "I pulled off to the side of the road and I cried," Pryor said. Leonard retired for the first time 6 months later. Now, everybody was crying there. Can you imagine if Pryor would have fought Leonard and then the winner would have fought Duran in the second, the second rematch? It boggles the mind. That would have sold so many pay-per-views and it would have created such a sensation. I think most boxing fans' head would explode. But better was to come. The only other fighter that was the quality of Leonard and Duran was the class of the division. The very, very erudite, handsome and talented, the classic fighter, Alexis Arguello. Now, on November 12th, 1982, he took on Arguello in a very tough fight, winning by 14-round TKO before a crowd of 24,000 at the Orange Bowl and a live HBO audience. The fight was dubbed the Battle of the Champions by WBA promoter Bob Arum. It was eventually named the Fight of the Decade by The Ring. I saw that fight. There is no level of excitement can describe watching those two fighters attack each other. Arguello, kind of the passive-aggressive style, Pryor to the aggressive fighter, and they complemented each other, but the later rounds, I think if we only won 12, I think Arguello would have won. Now, for the fight, Pryor made $1.6 million, while Arguello was paid $1.5 million. Now, Arguello was a 12-5 favorite, was attempting to become the first boxer to win world titles in 4 weight divisions. And ironically, he was a resident of Canada and has the Canadian flag tattooed on his shoulder, so another Canadian connection. Now, the end of the fight was controversial. Arguello landed a punch in the 13th round that seemed to stun Pryor, and despite trailing on 2 to 3 scorecards, Arguello had things tilting in his direction. Between the 13th and 14th rounds, HBO's microphones caught Pryor's trainer, Panama Lewis, telling cutman Artie Curley, "Give me the other bottle, the one I mixed." Now, there's some speculation there was liquor in the bottle or some type of energy drink. Some people say peppermint schnapps. But let's put this in perspective, ladies and gentlemen. If liquor is not used as what you call a boost, it basically puts you to sleep and makes you drunk. Why would that give him a boost in a 14th round? But whatever he was drinking, it seemed to revive Pryor. Coming up quickly for the 14th, he landed a barrage of unanswered blows before referee Stanley Christodoulou, South African, stopped it. Arguello collapsed in the canvas near the ropes, where he lay for several minutes. Dehydration was a big factor as well. Now, another big fight was April 2nd, 1983, when he knocked out former WBC super lightweight champion Sang-Hoon Kim in the 3rd round. Now, let's put this in perspective just to remember. Some people call it super lightweight, some was junior welterweights, or is what he called expanded weight or lightweight transition. Now, the Arguello rematch you knew was coming. Of all places, the big bastion of boxing at the time, Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas. And again, September 9th, 1983 was almost a holiday in North America. Everybody was watching that fight. And Pryor made $2.25 million for the fight, with Arguello getting $1.75. Now, Lewis had his license revoked prior to the match after he removed the padding for the gloves of Louis Resto before his tragic fight with Billy Collins Jr. on June 16 of that year. Pryor eventually hired Richie Cacchetti to train him, but they had a falling out. 2 weeks before the Arguello rematch, Pryor brought in, of all people, Emmanuel Stewart, who had guided many world champions, as his trainer. The rematch, unfortunately, was not as competitive as the first one. Pryor was badly staggering towards the end of round 2 by an Arguello uppercut, but he dropped Arguello with a right cross in the first, and again with a left hook in the 4th. Now, eventually, Pryor put Arguello down for the count in the 10th round. After the fight, because of the strength of both battles on them, Arguello and Pryor announced they were retiring from boxing. However, Pryor's retirement didn't last long. In March '84, he was announced he was going to fight again. "I never really retired," he said. "I just rested. I vacated the title because the WBA insisted I defend it every 6 months. The newly formed IBF immediately recognized him as the world champion." Now, shortly before Pryor made his comeback, his proposed multi-million-dollar fight with WBA lightweight champion Ray Mancini fell through when Mancini was knocked out by Livingston Bramble on June 1st of '84. Pryor actually cried, said Aram. "I saw the tears." Now, on June 22nd, '84, he defended his IBF title against Nicky Forlano in Toronto. Pryor knocked down Forlano twice in the first round, but was unable to finish him. Pryor eventually won a lopsided 15-round unanimous verdict, and Forlano, a tough nut, became the first boxer in 27 fights to last an entire fight with Pryor. Now, Pryor eventually defended his title against future IBF light welterweight champion Gary Hinton on March 2nd, '85, winning by a 15-round split decision. He got off to a sluggish start, but came in strong in the second half, winning 5 of the last 7 rounds on the cards of judges Frank Cairo, who voted for Hinton, and Phil Newman, and all 7 on the card of Judge Lawrence Wallace. Pryor eventually dropped Hinton early in the 14th round with a right to the chin, which gave him the unanimous decision. But in the mid-'80s, unfortunately, Pryor had a lot of setbacks. His life had been consumed by drugs. We had rumors of a death dating back to the Arguello fight. In December '85, he was stripped of the IBF title for failure to defend. Now, after 29 months out of the ring, Pryor, insisting he was now clean from drugs, attempted a comeback. He fought welterweight journeyman Bobby Joe Young in Fort Lauderdale, Florida on August 8, '87. Pryor was not himself in the match and was knocked out in the 7th round. Now, on December 15, 1988, he eventually scored his 3rd round knockout of club fighter Hermano Morales in Rochester, New York. Now, the drugs were not out of his system. By April 1980, he was ordered to undergo 2 years of treatment for drug abuse. He pled no contest to a charge of possessing illegal drug paraphernalia, a pipe used for smoking cocaine, which was found in his car after he was stopped by the police in Cincinnati in September of '89. Pryor next fought Darrell Jones on May 16, 1990 in Madison, Wisconsin, and winning by first-round knockout against Jones, who had a 13-13 record. Now, before the Jones fight, Pryor had surgery to remove a cataract and repair a detached retina. After the surgery, he was denied a license to fight by the states of California, New York, and Nevada, were the three main states for pro boxing. The Nevada State Medical Report declared Pryor to be legally blind in his left eye. His vision in his left was 20/400. However, with corrective lenses, the vision improved to 20/70. The state of Wisconsin gave him a license after he agreed to sign a waiver, releasing the state from liability for any damage he may suffer in the fight. Again, his last bout was in Norman, Oklahoma, December 4th, 1990, and he knocked out unheralded Roger Chody in the 7th round and ended his career with a record of 39-1 with 35 knockouts. Now, Pryor finally kicked his drug habit in 93 and remained drug-free until his death by heart trouble in 2016. He was eventually inducted into the International Boxing Hall of Fame in 96. Now, the Hawk, again, was voted the greatest light welterweight in boxing history by the Houston Boxing Hall of Fame in 2014. The HBHOF is a voting body composed entirely of current and former fighters. Again, 40 fights, 39-1. The legendary victories pile up. I don't think he ever fought a fight against a non-top 20 contender. But when he knocked off Cervantes, we knew he was the real deal. But some of the biggest lesson I think he learned, and he said that publicly, when he drew with Summerhays, he said he learned that don't send it to the scorecards, because if he would fought against a more active puncher, he might have lost. But kind of weird about again, Aaron Pryor fighting Al Ford, a very good contender, Gaetan Hart, and then Nicky Forlano. Like his handlers did the right job. He was fighting kind of internationally, but not leaving, the confines of the judging or the referees that he need. But in the history of Cincinnati, they've had a lot of great athletes, played for the Bengals and the different squads. But Aaron Pryor, we didn't know how good he was because the expected fights, he had destroyed his side of the division. If he would have fought Duran, Leonard, Benitez, smaller contenders like Ranzani, some of the up-and-coming contenders of the early 1980s. But 5'6", I don't know how he defeated Thomas Hearns. Pryor was a bulldog. And, there's only one bulldog in Canada, is Bulldog Olsen. But you look at Aaron Pryor, the quality of fighting he provided, it's just amazing to think and look at. Because I watch a lot of Pryor's fights, and going against Alexis Arguello, my God. I mean, to have him defeat and dominate Arguello for 2 fights, because he was the Muhammad Ali of the lower divisions. He was that classy. But, unheard of. $2 million purses in the 1980s, which is quite equatable to 25 million now. He brought in the big money fights for the lower divisions besides, the welterweight. But what a time for boxing, ladies and gentlemen. From 135 to 147. 12 pounds has made 120 contenders and about 55 title holders in that era. It was just extremely tremendous. And it was nice that the IBF came along, because that gives certain fighters a better chance. Because it was so good back then, to have just a unified champion didn't tell all the talent. 3 belts really paid off. And that showed in the welterweight and middleweight. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is our latest Ventures podcast on our YouTube channel. If you like what we're doing, give us a like, comment, and subscribe. If you're a big fan of the Hawk, especially from Cincinnati, give me your best memory of him. But Aaron Pryor, boys and boys, when he passed away a few years ago, all those memories flooding back. We used to get a pizza, some KFC, and sit down with a 2-liter. And when Aaron Pryor came on, we knew it was either going to be a tough fight. Like I said, tough as nails. A good, put it this way, one of the greatest fighters who fought like the Canadian fighters for toughness. That was not Canadian. We considered him almost a dual citizen. He was that loved in Canada because he gave Forlano a chance, gave Gaetan Hart a chance. He took on Arguello, and He made a lot of people's boxing fans' dreams come true. The best against the best. Thanks for listening. Bye.